Welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid Muhammad, and I'd like to welcome you all for coming and just giving us an ear for a second. Also, would like to thank our guest. He should be in any second now, hopefully, Professor Dennis Etler. We're waiting for him to come in, but until he makes it here, I would just like to thank all of you for joining us and for giving us your ear and your time. There's a lot of economic, geopolitical, political news that is going on that is not making the rounds in the world. It's a lot of stuff that is happening that people are not being informed about. There is some major moves, and I'm going to discuss a few things with you first before we get into the situation of China and America. That big 800-pound gorilla that is in the room, because there's a lot that is going on that will determine the direction of global politics, global economic, and wealth for the foreseeable future. And if you don't have a basic understanding of what is taking place, if you don't have a basic understanding or to the background of what is going on and why America and her policy has become so belligerent and so out of tune and out of whack with the norms, then you would be lost in all of this stuff that is going on. So I want to touch on a few things before we enter into this subject of China and America going against each other, okay? And for those of you, someone asked me on the last show when I wore this hat, it says Nabard spirit. Nabard is a martial arts that me and my children took for almost a decade. And it is grappling and modern day striking and kung fu and fitness. So for those of you, I have to answer that. But now let's go into something. There's been a lot of things happening in the Middle East that you must be aware of, from the explosions in Haifa to the explosions all across Israel. Now, what you don't know is that the axis of resistance, which is Syria, Hezbollah, some of the members of the Iraqi Hezbollah, and Iran have been touching Israel because Israel is constantly bombing and constantly flaunting international law. Now, I'm just filling you in with this stuff here, okay? Because when you get this little bit, it'll make you better understand the situation with America and China and why America has become so belligerent, as I said. So Iran is striking back. Iran has said that they are tired of biding their time. They are tired of waiting for the Russians to live up to their word on air defense in Syria. So Iran has deployed some air defense systems to I don't to Syria, but I don't think it's the Qassar air defense system. I forget which one it is. It is the one that took down the U.S. Drone that was flying over Iranian airspace. That is the one that was deployed to, well, at least that's the one that was informed to me, that was deployed to Syria and certain areas. Okay, and this is why you see an uptick in violence in occupied Palestine, an uptick in violence in Lebanon, an uptick in violence in Iraq and in Syria, because America and Israel and the Western world are losing their grip in the Middle East. And they see China's hand behind all of this. You understand? As a matter of fact, as we talk, it was official, and my patrons on Patreon got this long before you did, that Iran was it was official. Iran was actually in a negotiations to acquire at least 36 J-10. I believe the make of it is C, if I'm not mistaken, the J-10C, which are comparable to the American F-15 Strike Eagle. As a matter of fact, it performed better than that, and its radars have twice the distance that it can see than the American F-15s, and it also is faster, more maneuverable, and they carry the PL-12 and the PL-15 missiles. what's significant about these missiles are that they are 2 to 4 times the range of any American-made missiles. So Iran is in discussion, and right now they're just trying to hash out how these things will be paid. This is a byproduct of the $400 billion agreement that Iran and China had announced. Now, I told people who were a part of my Patreon last year that the deal was already done and that that they would announce it in the coming weeks. That was last year. And then coming up into this year, they did announce the $400 billion deal. This deal is major, and it has everything to do with America and how they're breaking America's stranglehold on global politics and economics. Because with this $400 billion deal, Iran will be trading oil and gas for the renminbi or the yuan, okay? The Chinese yuan, that is the Chinese currency. And China will be investing in infrastructure and in technology and in farming and in other fields and areas in medicine in Iran. And also the part that was kept as a hush-hush deal was the military exchange. That China and Iran will be holding games. As you saw recently, they held naval games. It was Iran, Russia, and China holding naval games. Then you heard them hold military games. I think troops were involved. The ground troops were involved. All of this is a part of the strategic deal that was struck by China and Iran. And this has everything to do with the breaking of the power of America. And if America's economic power is broken, Israel's military power is broken, because Israel leeches off America, and to the tune of billions upon billions upon billions of taxpayers' dollars every year. This does not include the aid packages, which sometimes goes into the tens of billions of dollars on the side of the money itself, the military aid packages that Israel gets to continue her domination of the Middle East. So with this deal that is underway, this $400 billion strategic deal that is underway with Iran and China, remember that we say that Iran is a Middle Eastern nation, but in reality, Iran is a Central Asian nation. It borders the Middle East, but it is a Central Asian nation also, all right? And Iran would be key to the Belt and Road Initiative, which China would use to break the stranglehold of American power economically, strategically. And this has given everyone pause in the halls of Washington, D.C., and this has given everyone pause in the halls of Brussels and in London. So you have seen a concerted effort in the news, whether it's print, television, or digital, to demonize and vilify China on every end, to wage a propaganda war, an economic war, which they cannot win, and a asymmetric war in all spheres of power, and also to try to threaten China with a military war. And to prove what I'm saying is this: America has doubled her deployments to Asia, right? Who comes on the heels of that? Tell me who comes on the heels of that. Did you know Germany deployed a ship over there? Did you know that the British are deploying their largest naval fleet over there? Do you know that France is deploying a nuclear sub and a couple of warships over there? Did you know that the so-called European, when Europe wants to be sly and not let the world know that the military wing of Europe is doing something, they just do it individually as EU or European nations. But all of these nations comprise of, together, they are the component of NATO. And NATO is a military branch of the U.S. and the British military industrial complex. And this is the enforcer of dollar, pound, euro domination across the globe. Let me say that again. And this is the enforcer to dollar, pound, and euro currency domination around the world. So when you look at the strategic moves that are at play, you can see that things are building up strategically for a confrontation. America is met. Let me stop right here and say something to you all. I want you to look at the environment that is going on. I want you to look at the total environment, the whole military and political and economic environment that is going on all around the globe. I want you to look at what's taking place. I'm going to play something for you all in just a second. I just want you to realize that what you see is the collapse of American power globally and universally, which means that it is the collapse of Western power universally or globally. And this is one of the key components that is missed when you see the constant provocations and the constant deployments and redeployments and the constant beating of the war drums and the propaganda against China. Because the Western world did not see themselves as an equal to a non, and this is, listen, this is not, I'm not using race, I'm just being real. The Western world does not see itself as an equal to China because China is not white. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you a little history on the United Nations, okay? I'm going to give you a little history on the United Nations, and I want you to research it. I want you to do some research, okay? I want you to see whether or not I'm telling you the truth. And I'm going to play the clips in a second, but I want you to bear with me a second. When the United Nations was founded, first it was the League of Nations. But as they started to go over into the United Nations, when it was founded, they founded it on the principle that there could be no other power other than a white Christian power to pass laws or enforce global governance. This is true. This is fine. You can do your research. This is not me making up anything. Okay. If you look at the 4 of the 5 permanent Security Council members, they do not comprise. That is not an accurate representation of the global population. So how in the world can it be for equality in global governance? I want you to understand this. So we say 4. It's 5 permanent Security Council members. 4 of them, count them, 4 of them are white. The United States, Britain, or the UK, right? Who else? Talk to me. Is it France? Who else? The United States, the UK, France, and Russia, right? What is the 5th power? China. Now, you say, well, China is not a white nation and they're on the council. That's right. But they did not intend for the China that you see today to be on the council. They wanted the China that was going to be under Shanghai check to be on the council so that they can dominate it completely. And they believed that Shanghai check would be the leader of China. And that's why the United States, even after Shanghai check was run out of mainland China, they still, up into the 1970s, recognized the Republic of China, which is Taiwan, over the People's Republic of China, which is the mainland China. Okay. So I have to give you history lessons, geopolitical lessons also, so that you can understand the governance. Now, out of the 5, count them, the 5 permanent Security Council members, France, the UK, and Russia are European, okay? And then we add America, right? So that's 4. Now, even if you added all 4 of those up, when you talk about the population of the entire world, the Western world, or let's say, just to keep it straight and narrow, the white world does not comprise more than 1/5 at the most. We know it's not that. 1/5 of the population of the globe, and we know it's not that much. So why would a global council put more power into the hands of a fewer people? And then think about this to show you and we're going to go to the China conundrum. We're talking about the China conundrum right now, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. But we have to give you background. We have to give you a backdrop to what's going on, okay? Now, think about that. 5 Security Council members, and they can overrule nearly 200 countries together. Nearly 200 countries together. That is crazy, isn't it? Do you think that's equality? Do you think that's justice? Do you think that's fair? Huh? But that's the way it was set up. And that's why you see this is going on. That's why you see, even with that, even with the disagreements between the council members, they don't want to shake up, even after all of this. And people are lobbying. South Africa is lobbying. You have India lobbying. You have Brazil lobbying. You have other indigenous nations lobbying for a permanent seat on the Security Council. But America has rejected it. Britain has rejected it. France has rejected it, right? For expanding, because they want to keep the reins of power to themselves, okay? Now, as I'm talking to you, this shows you how innately racist the global architecture is and how it was set up. But here's something. America in the Western world sees a threat to that. In China, they see a threat to it. And now they are preparing. See, they've been able to bully everybody, but now China has built up herself economically, politically, and militarily to not only be able to rebuff and assault, but to counterattack and go on the offensive, whether it be technologically or economically or politically or geopolitically. And this is something that has not been done in the last 100+ years. And so when you have a bully that has been able to bully without hindrance for so long, and someone else grows up and they're no longer the little skinny scared kid that they once were, and they have grown up and matured in size, and they have mastered the art of self-defense, and they're no longer scared of the threats. They're no longer scared of the provocations. It drives the bully mad, and that's what you're seeing. The bullies are going mad because they can no longer bully someone that does not belong to the Western approved world order. And this is why the United States and Britain, specifically and especially the United States and Britain, but the European Union also, but specifically those 2 nations, are always talking about preserving the international order, or the rules-based quote unquote order. And it says that we would like to invite China in, but she must obey the rules. Okay, somebody has to ask the question. Who wrote the rules? Who do the rules benefit? And why aren't you inclined to change or adapt the rules for someone? This is serious. I'm asking you these things. Now, we understand that the rules that they're talking about are the rules that they wrote. from whether they set up the global order when Britain was the so-called supreme power, and as she passed the mantle to her daughter or her sister, America, and the dollar became the preeminent currency, which allowed America to grow in wealth and power and influence and to spread her tentacles around the globe, right? And then you see a nation like China that has only grown for the last 30 to 40 years, grown up in intelligence and wisdom and power and influence and wealth. You see them as a threat to your order because they don't want to play by your rules that you impose. And if you don't believe that you impose the rules, then why the hell did you go in there and overthrow Muammar Gaddafi? Why are you trying to oust Syrian President Bashar Assad? Because he didn't violate any international rules. Muammar Gaddafi was trying to get in your good graces. Assad didn't violate any rules. The only rules that he really violated that you could not stand is that Syria did not, just like Libya, did not have a central bank. You wanted to impose on them what you call international order or rules, your rules-based order. You must take this and submit to this in order to be accepted into our realm. And so when Syria refused, you go into Syria, you didn't use the UN to go in there, did you? You just went on in there illegally, and you're still occupying it, and you're stealing all of the wheat, you're stealing all of the grain supplies that are being harvested, you're stealing all of the oil, you're stealing all of their gas, or well, not all, but 80 to 90% of it. You've bombed Libya back into the Stone Age, which was once the most prosperous nation on the Mediterranean. I'm not just talking about in Africa, I'm talking about on the Mediterranean. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of European nations reside off the coast of the Mediterranean. Libya was the most prosperous nation under Muammar Gaddafi on the Mediterranean. As a matter of fact, let me give you a few facts because I'm laying a base for something, okay? So you got to give me some time. Do you know, prior to America bombing Libya, that Muammar Gaddafi was to receive a United Nations prize? Do you know that? I bet you didn't even know that, because the propaganda was so intense and so immense to vilify him as a dictator and a tyrant, these code words that the rules-based order uses against anyone that they see as a threat or anyone that they see who will not bow to their rules or bow to their powers and dictates. So did you know, right before the United States really started bombing Libya, that the United Nations was about to present Muammar Gaddafi with a certificate and an honor that America herself hadn't received? And it was about bringing her people from being the poorest nation on earth to being one of the most prosperous and wealthy nations, and having a literacy rate that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a literacy rate that was up between 92 to 98% literacy, and alleviating mass poverty. But America deaded that. She put pressure on the UN to halt that because it would destroy her case that Muammar Gaddafi was a tyrant. But look at what happened with the rules base. Okay, I want you to see something, and this is why they see China as a threat. Because the rules-based order went into Libya, bombed them to the Stone Age, and then they turned over the construction to U.S. and Western companies, the reconstruction, and the power plants, the water plants, all of that stuff was then used for profit. But under Muammar Gaddafi, there was free water, there was free power, there was free education. That if you got married, you got, I believe it was $40,000 to $50,000 you got as a couple for marriage. You got to choose your own schooling. If you wanted to study in Libya or if you wanted to go abroad, the state paid for that and gave you a stipend. But under the U.S., it's chaos over there. That's the rules-based order. Let's look now further, right? There was stability in Syria. But what happened under the rules-based order? Huh? Look at Syria now. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, and thousands of people are murdered every few months with this war that is being imposed on Syria by the rules-based order, right? From your Democrat to your Republican. They see no difference in this. They see no difference in this. So every time America and the Western world sees a threat, you'll see them go lock in step. America say something, then Britain will come out and say something, then you'll see the European Union say something, then you'll see NATO say something. It's all lock in step to try to preserve the old world order. This is why they try to demonize anything new and say, a new world order is this and this and this. True. If the new world order is being brought in by the people of the old world order, then it's going to be hell. Because you have to bring in something new, you have to be detached from the old. And none of these people who are talking about a new society is detached from the greed, the corruption, the ineptitude, the arrogance, and the imperialism of Western society. None of them. So they don't have the qualifications to bring in something new. And so they fear that a rising non-white or Western nation would challenge them, especially that China has built up its economic power. See, listen, let me tell you a lesson that China learned. When America bombed Iraq, America threatened to bomb the Chinese in Iraq. Xi Jinping was the president at the time, and America threatened. And at the time, China did not have the military capabilities that they have today. So I believe it was either in Iraq or in Yugoslavia. That I believe it was Yugoslavia. That America was bombing the nation, and the Chinese, they said that they got signals that the Chinese were giving them intelligence, giving the host nation intelligence of where the bombers were coming from, and the United States bombed that embassy, which is an act of war. You understand me? Because the embassy is considered the soul of that nation that it represents. And America bombed that embassy. Okay? Killing the Chinese ambassador and other Chinese involved. Devastating it. And the Chinese said that this will never happen again. Ever. As a matter of fact, the president Xi Jinping commemorated that a few days ago, I think last week. And he said, we would never let that happen again. We will meet iron with iron, he said. We will meet diplomacy with diplomacy and iron with iron. That's what he said. Okay? So I'm laying the base for you to understand what is going on between China and America. America is losing her grip economically and her position militarily. It is no coincidence that the nations that she targets are nations that are either friendly to her said enemies of Russia and China, or they are allied with the said nations, Russia and China. Okay? That's no coincidence. All right? Now, I'm going to play something for you. And I want you to pay close attention. But first, I got to play a little clip, a copyright disclaimer, because we are a news organization and we have to give you news. And before we use clips from others, we give you a copyright disclaimer showing you that we are a news organization so that YouTube will not do anything funny to us and suspend us like they've done on multiple occasions, or they won't give us strikes. Maybe they will after this, but hey, we got the justification. We have this. So I'm going to play this first, and then after I play this disclaimer, all right, we're going to go into another clip and we'll address this. And I hope Mr. Etler get to come on, okay? But bear with us, even though he's not, just bear with us. Now, that disclaimer is played. Now, I'm going to play something for you by General King. This was a clip off of Fox News. And the arrogance, listen to me good. I just want you to listen to the clip. How they talk about China and how they talk about China as belligerent. China is more aggressive. China is threatening and this and this. And China, and I want you to see the arrogance, the hypocrisy in this stuff, and some of the truth that he's revealed. But in this clip, they're twisting it to a Western narrative, right? I'm going to ask you this before I play the clip. How many nations is China occupying or bombing? How many nations is China threatening to bomb? How many nations have China sanctioned? And how many nations is China double crossing? Now that we got that underway and out of the way, and we pose those same questions to America, you be dumbfounded. Like, I can't count that many. I know it's a lot. I just don't know. I don't know the number, the exact number, because it's so many. So with that said, and we have that understanding, when you listen to General King, listen to him with a grain of salt, because he's telling you from a Eurocentric, U.S. imperialistic stand. And I want you to see how he believes that America has the right to threaten China and to put bases around China in Asia, but China is a threat to America for flexing its muscle in his own yard and in his own neighborhood. It is absolutely, it boggles my mind that more of you people don't see this. More of you people don't understand the limits to arrogance of these people. The entitlement. You could tell in his voice, you can tell in the video that he has been bought, sold, and paid for by that exceptionalism that they often talk about. That, yeah, America can do it, and when America does it, it's for freedom, liberty, democracy, and greatness. But if you do anything that America does not like, you are being belligerent. You're provoking the nations. You're aggressive, right? That's what they say, right? Now I want you to listen to him. Let me play the disclaimer one more time, because I don't want to have no problems with YouTube, okay?
Well, joining me now to discuss all this is retired General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Jerry.
So everybody's focused on China, obviously, the rising power in Asia, the rising challenge in the world to the United States. How great is the risk, do you think, of an all-out confrontation with them?
Well, I think in the near term, that's probably quite moderate. But the fact is that President Xi is different than all of his predecessors, to include Mao Zedong. And by that I mean he's the most aggressive, the most ambitious, and fundamentally as maligned as Mao Zedong was. But he has a global view in terms of replacing the United States as a world power, and also wants to dominate and control the Indo-Pacific region. And he's seeking that by dominating economically, technologically.
I had to stop that. I just had to stop. I'm gonna play it over again for you guys. But did you see what his real problem was? It was not what China was doing per se. It was that China was replacing America. And by that measure, China is being belligerent and aggressive. And he said China is trying to become the most dominant power in Asia. And trying to do what? Replace the U.S., right? But it's okay for America to be the dominant power. Oh, it's okay for that, right? Even though America has waged war all across the continent of Asia. I'm showing you something. I'm showing you something that you do not analyze, that you do not just you take this stuff for granted, and they talk right in front of you, and you don't process this stuff. So it is all right for America to go thousands of miles away and put military bases, dozens of them, across Asia, to try to maintain her position. But it is not all right for China to build up her military to rebuff any kind of trying to blackmail through politics or military use. Huh? I'm asking you these things. Because remember, I want to ask you a question. How many bases has America closed in South Korea? How many bases has she closed in Japan? We're not going to even go any further in Asia. We're just going to ask about those. And then we look and say, well, why does she need so many bases? Because she says she has the second largest nuclear armament in the world. What is the nuclear weapons for? I'm asking you these things. The nuclear weapons, she said, is to preserve America's independence and national security. Then why the hell do you need all the bases around the globe? Either the weapons work or they don't. You use those forward bases to try to put pressure on anyone you see in that area that might threaten your position, your power, or your influence. Because you're not just there for the security of your nation, you're there to extract resources and mineral and labor, and to make sure no nation rises to your level or higher than you. And that is stated in your national document, your national security document, to not allow any nation or any combination of nations to be able to rise on an equal playing field as you are. That's simple. So when you listen to Mr. King, General King, listen with a keen ear, pun intended, listen with a keen ear, so that you can understand the arrogance. I mean, man, it is almost unbelievable how much arrogance that is being shown here, that America is entitled to do these things thousands of miles away, but China is not allowed to do something on her own border. That is tantamount to me coming to your house, in your neighborhood, setting up shop all around you with guns and drugs and everything else, and telling you, hey, you're a threat to me because I see you sometimes walking out of your gate looking at my house, looking at the houses that I took. That's crazy. That is absolutely insane. But we don't look at it like this. But I want you to listen to him, because he says a lot of things in here. So listen close.
Well, joining me now to discuss all this is retired General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Jerry.
So everybody's focused on China, obviously, the rising power in Asia, the rising challenge in the world to the United States. How great is the risk, do you think, of an all-out confrontation with them?
Well, I think in the near term, that's probably quite moderate. But the fact is that President Xi is different than all of his predecessors, to include Mao Zedong. And by that I mean he's the most aggressive, the most ambitious, and fundamentally as maligned as Mao Zedong was. But he has a global view in terms of replacing the United States as a world power, and also wants to dominate and control the Indo-Pacific region. And he's seeking that by dominating economically, technologically, militarily, and geopolitically. That is what he is about. And I actually believe that he's actually increased his aggressiveness since the Biden administration has come in. And by that I mean he's had, listen, Jerry, just a few weeks ago he had 250 maritime militia ships in the South China Sea as fishing vessels. They're all militarized by their military, denying the countries in the region access to those international fishing rights. And he is aggravating and intimidating Taiwan much more so. 2020 was the worst year. The first few months now, they've increased rather significantly in all the violations of their air defense zones, as much as 20+ aircraft at one time doing it. Why is he doing that? I think the message is clear. He wants to send a message to our allies in the region. He knows President Biden is trying to put our arms around our allies like President Trump did, but he wants to send a message to them that, look, nothing's changed here. This administration is not going to be able to protect you. And that is what the message he's sending to him. And by the way, he's the first economy to recover from the pandemic, and he knows full well that in the Indo-Pacific region, militarily, he outguns us and he outmans us. There are qualitative differences, to be sure.
So, General,
but those are absolute facts.
And so, General, realistically, as you say, Taiwan seems to be the likely flashpoint. There are many, but this seems to be the most likely. China is, it's in China's backyard, literally. They have enormous military capabilities there, as they've been flexing their muscles and demonstrating over the last few weeks. What realistically can the United States really do to deter China, to deter Beijing from going all out and retaking Taiwan?
Yeah, well, it's not that complicated. To build effective deterrence militarily, you have to have, one, the capability. Your adversary's got to see it as being real, and it's going to impose cost on that adversary by taking action. And two, that adversary's got to believe that you're going to use it. I believe during the Obama administration, they didn't believe, one, the capability wasn't as good as it should be, and two, they didn't think they would use it. So that's most important. But what we must do immediately with a sense of urgency is move more capability into the region to defend our bases in the region with military defense systems, long-range missile systems that can reach the Chinese systems that they have on their coast. And those long-range missiles that the Chinese have reach all of our bases in the region, in the Western Pacific, and can take down our carrier battle groups as well. All of our military knows this. We've played war games. This is capability we have right now. Move it into the region. Let them see it. Increase our capability. And then bring on the advanced weapon systems that we need rather quickly, and to give us at least a match to their technological advantages that they have.
General Jackeen, we've got to wrap it there, unfortunately. I'd love to talk more about it, but thanks very much.
So you see, the matter of that is this. He said something that was very, very slick. He said that China outmans and outguns America. That's what he said. And he also says that China is going to in so many words, he said China will be the dominant power economically, politically, geopolitically, scientifically, the same thing that I'm saying to you, right? And this is what America fears as a threat to what they call the international order or the rules-based order. This is what they fear. And so he says, he says, so what we should do, so he's in a frenzy. And we have Professor Etler on, and we're going to bring him in just a second, okay? And because he's a China expert, and he'll give you some of his qualifications as the show goes on. But General King said that bring in missile systems to target all along China's coast from all of the U.S. bases over there. They didn't say on the mainland of the U.S. They said the military bases over there. Over where? In Asia, right? In Japan, in South Korea, and the surrounding areas. So America is scared that China is threatening her dominion globally. That's one of the main factors. She's losing out economically, militarily, politically, and geopolitically, and technologically. As a matter of fact, China has already started to institute 6G networks. They just introduced 5G, and they're already doing 6G, and they're doing quantum. They're doing this quantum stuff that America is only now trying to catch up with. So with that being said, because I got to play a lot of clips, but I promised you all I was going to bring you Professor Dennis Etler, and I'm going to bring him in. How's it going today?
Hey, it's good to see you again. First off, I want to ask how you doing? How's your family?
We're doing pretty good. Thank you so much. How about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I got all my shots and I'm good to go. So yeah, it's good. I'm fine.
So Mr. Elliott, you caught the tail end of this like 4-minute clip about General King and how he was talking about China is aggressive and China wants to dominate the Asia Pacific region, and he used keywords and displace America as the why is it so bad that China wants to be the big kid on his own block? It's not trying to be the big kid on America's block.
Oh yeah, well, it's absurd. the U.S. Is really just turning reality on its head. China's not a threat to the U.S. We're a threat to China. China doesn't have its fleets off of our coasts, but we have our fleet off of its. And not only that, China doesn't instigate rebellion and secession in the United States, but we do that in China. You know about the National Endowment for Democracy, which is basically a front for the CIA. You might recall back with the Church Committee in the 70s when all the crimes of the CIA were being exposed. And they had these congressional hearings. And they tried to cover for the CIA by creating a civilian agency, the NED, to do the things that the CIA had been doing clandestinely, but now doing it more in the open, but under the guise of promoting democracy. So you see the NED, it funds secessionists in Xinjiang and Tibet. It funds insurrectionists in Hong Kong. All these, NGOs, these so-called human rights organizations, which is a misnomer. They're basically regime change organizations, and they're employed all over the world to foment regime change movements and other ways of disrupting those countries that we designate as our enemies. But they pose no threat to the U.S. China poses no threat to the U.S. other than the fact that China is doing very well for itself. Its economy is booming. Its people are united. There was just recently a survey conducted by the Federation of Democracies or something like that. It's a NATO-affiliated think tank, Alliance of Democracies Foundation. That's what it's called. And they have an annual meeting about the prospects for, quote, democracy around the world, right? So they have a survey about the state of democracy in the world. And they survey countries across the globe, including China and Vietnam and most of the EU and countries in the global south, the US, et cetera, et cetera. And they ask a question, one of the questions, do you consider your country to be democratic? So something like 75% of Chinese people surveyed, and this survey is a uniform survey, done in the same fashion wherever it's conducted. 75% of Chinese feel that they live in a democratic society, where their concerns and issues are heard and the government responds to them. Well, just guess, what was the percentage of Americans who thought they live in a democratic society? I want you to just guess what that percentage was.
25%?
Well, not quite that bad. People still have a lot of illusions. 49%, which is still a majority of Americans feel that we do not live in a democratic society, whereas the overwhelming majority of Chinese feel that they do. Well, that tells you something about the perceptions, the false perceptions that the American leadership has, that we are the bastion of democracy. Well, then there's another question that they ask, whether or not you value democracy. And there's what they call the democracy deficit, the difference between those who value, the percentage who value democracy versus those who think they actually have it, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so if you ask a Chinese person, do you value democracy? 85% said they value democracy. You ask an American, do you value democracy? 73% said they value democracy. So not only are the Chinese, not only do they feel that they live in a democratic country to a greater degree than Americans do, they value democracy more than Americans do. So all of this rhetoric about the U.S. and how it wants to promote democracy, to the point where we have to impose sanctions and we have to invade and occupy countries. We have to bomb and strafe other countries so that they adhere to our vision of democracy is just so much poppycock. There's no other way of putting it. And this idea that China is a threat. Well, China doesn't have 800 military bases. China doesn't have 7 fleets flying the 7 seas with their aircraft carriers off the coast of California and the eastern seaboard. China doesn't have bases in Central and America and the Caribbean, but we have bases. The Pacific is a U.S. It's a U.S. lake. We own the Pacific. You look at where we have our bases and whatnot. There's Guam, there's the Mariana Islands, there's the Micronesian Federation, there's Palau. We're stationed in Okinawa, in Japan and South Korea. The whole periphery of the Pacific is U.S. territory, basically. I mean, the whole Pacific is like an American lake, right? And we complain that China wants to have the South China Sea as a buffer against the U.S. Trying to interdict its supply lines and whatnot. So the fictions that are pushed by not only Trump, but every American administration. Now we have Biden, and he's as bad or worse than Trump when it comes to all this, because they sugarcoat what they're doing with all this bullshit rhetoric about freedom and democracy and whatnot. And who can believe a word these people have to say? And they have their allies in Europe who basically they're lapdogs around the world that just coddle up to all of this because they really have no alternative. The dependencies and protectorates, and the U.S. cracks its whip and they fall in line. So it's against their own self-interest. And then you have all of this propaganda, this propaganda assault, which is just nonsense on the face of it. They throw these words around like genocide and aggression, as if China. What aggression? How is China being aggressive towards anyone when all it's doing is protecting its own sovereignty? In Hong Kong, Taiwan, recognized by nearly the entire world as a province of China. How can China basically have incursions into its own airspace over Taiwan? That's absurd. Taiwan is in secession from China, just like we had a civil war in this country because the states seceded from the Union, and we didn't cotton to that. Now, did we?
I want to ask you a question. Why do you think so many people here, right, are lacking critical thinking, and they follow the mainstream news, or they follow the line of the day so close, and they don't venture outside those lines to do some critical thinking and some research for themselves to understand that all of this is connected economically and technologically and geopolitically?
Well, it's due to the fact that we're a very low knowledge nation. Our population is basically illiterate when it comes to anything beyond whatever they watch on TV or access on social media. They don't know anything about geopolitics. They don't know. They can't even identify most countries on a map. It seems they can't even identify, their own country on a map at times. So it's a matter of just a total lack of knowledge, and it makes them susceptible to. It's like a empty glass, and you can pour whatever you want into it, right? And then they just drink that glass full of lies and propaganda, and they think it tastes really good because they don't know any better. But it's really poison that they're drinking. It's Kool-Aid. They're drinking the Kool-Aid that the CIA and the FBI, that's another thing, if I can go off on a tangent. It wasn't so long ago that any thinking person understood that both the CIA and FBI were totally duplicitous. They lied, and as Pompeo said, they lied, they stole, they cheated, they killed. Everybody, I don't know, back in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, everybody believed that. Nobody trusted the CIA or the FBI. They realized they were tools of the establishment out to oppress whomever stood in their way. But all of a sudden, it seems, if you watch all these liberal news shows like MSNBC or whatnot, even Democracy Now, which is totally deteriorated, and is just another mouthpiece for the neoliberals now. All of a sudden, oh wow, Brenner and all these other CIA operatives, they're like heroes of the day. They whatever they say, can be taken at face value, and it's really it's depressing to see that people that they just accept what they're told by these sources, which everybody knows are corrupt to the core. They accept whatever they're told as if it's gospel truth, and it's I mean, it's sort of hard to fathom, but that's the reason they believe whatever they're told. And even if the sources are debunked and whatnot, it's repeated ad nauseum on all of these liberal, quote, liberal news sources. Like I say, all the major networks, and even the alt news. The alt news has been totally co-opted. So if you think you're accessing an independent source, that's distinct from the mass media, the mainstream media, forget about it. Vox or whatever, the Daily Beast, Democracy Now, The Intercept, all they do is they spread the same misinformation, but they give it some credibility because they've established some sort of reputation that they're independent and they're objective, when all they're doing is spreading the same party line that you hear from Rachel Maddow and all these other hacks. So that's people in this country, they just accept what they're told.
I want everyone to stay tuned to the show. Do not turn away. I'm getting ready to black my screen out for a minute because I want to come. I have pulled up something that you were just talking about, and I want the people to hear it themselves. So I'm going to get another microphone so that they can hear exactly what you were saying when you were talking about Pompeo. So give me 1 second, please, everyone. Be patient with me. Give me 1 second. Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to put this up to the mic, and I want them to hear what Pompeo, let me put it over here, what Pompeo himself, former Secretary of State, had to say. And this
And
is
he
my
was
first time.
director of the CIA, remember that?
Right, yeah. So here it is. This is about the CIA. So I want you all to pay close attention. Here we go right here. Give me a second. Oh. Hold on 1 second. It says the video will play in a second. You know how YouTube puts commercials up. Hold on 1 second. Here it is. I guess I was the CIA director. We lied. We cheated. We stole. It's like we had entire training courses. Did you hear that? Did you hear what he just said?
Oh yeah, they lie, they steal, and they have steal, and they have entire training courses in how to do it. And let me just
go ahead.
Yeah. So this business about genocide in Xinjiang in China amongst the Uyghur people, which is a total fabrication. So how do they justify using that term is beyond me. Genocide is a very, very severe action, which entails the elimination of an entire population. And of course, it doesn't apply to a country like China. Nothing of the sort's happening there. But anyway, what kind of evidence do they have? Well, the main source is this ultra right-wing religious fanatic, Adrian Zenz, who has declared that his purpose in life is to take down China. The guy is a megalomaniac. And if you have that as your primary purpose in life, of course, you're going to do everything within your means to forward that. It doesn't matter whether you lie, cheat, or steal. You just fabricate stories with no evidence at all, or the evidence that's supplied is adulterated and twisted and turned to make it out to be something that it isn't, and misinterpreted and overinterpreted, exaggerated, whatever. And then they have there are these secessionists in Xinjiang funded by the NED, right? These are Uyghurs who have sold their souls to the devil, right? There are 30,000 of them who went to the Middle East to fight with ISIL, IS, with the idea of infiltrating back into China to set off an internal rebellion. They had terrorist attacks going on for years there. And of course, the situation was getting even more severe with these trained Uyghurs, jihadists, who were tasked to go back to China to foment secession in Xinjiang. Well, the U.S. has been funding these secessionist groups in Xinjiang. And then when they skip town and seek refuge in Turkey and then in England and wherever else, and they're interviewed by the BBC, and of course they have all these horror tales. I mean, this is anecdotal evidence. It's unsubstantiated. It's hearsay. It would never stand up in a court of law. I mean, you can say whatever you damn please. You can make up all sorts of tall tales. I mean, go to a library. This is my riff here. You go to a library. There are, say, the National, Congressional Library, whatever it's called, and there are millions of volumes, and there's whole sections of fiction. People write stories, and they're very elaborate stories with all sorts of detail about totally fictitious events. It's called fiction. We're very good at writing fiction. So why should you believe anything any of these people have to say? They just concoct it out of whole cloth. And that's what Pompeo said. Well, we have whole training courses in how to concoct these stories and how to try to convince people of what we tell them to believe. So there's just no reason to believe a word of what any of these people say. And they have satellite imaging. We know how reliable that is from the Iraq War, right? And then bogus investigations using so-called leaked Chinese documents. And if you read those documents, they're totally misconstrued and misinterpreted, right? So it's a house of cards. The whole Xinjiang business, genocide, forced labor, forced sterilizations, is all bullshit. But it's repeated ad infinitum, ad nauseum, and then we pressure, we arm twist our dependencies to basically come on board and repeat the same stuff. And then the news media kicks in, and they have one story after another based on all of this false information, and then it becomes a tool, it becomes a bludgeon. We can keep on hammering China about this and that and the other thing, and it serves the purposes of U.S. imperialism. They've been doing this for ages. They're
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I'm sorry. I wanted to interject and say, well, China must be very bad at genocide, because the Uyghurs population has grown exponentially since China went into that area and started educating them and started incorporating them into the main society or whatever. The population of the Uyghurs have exploded. So it's absolutely opposite of what the Western news is saying. And so, but remember, these fabricated stories. We can go back to Libya, when they were saying that Gaddafi and the troops. Notice they don't say the government; they'll say the regime to delegitimize the government of the people. And then they say Gaddafi and his troops were feeding people Viagra and going in and raping the people and all. And then now it's Assad, is the tyrant Assad is killing his own people, and it's just so much. This comes right out of the CIA playbook to try to give backing to their plans and justification, because they don't want a uprising at home from the people that can see through their lies. So they have to kind of give it a base or a justification to go in there. So they have to delegitimize the governments. They have to delegitimize and dehumanize the leaders and the military. So they call them thugs and tyrants and dictators. This is CIA 101, but I want to tie that into something. So as we're talking about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is China, and we're talking about the constant clashing of the United States and China. There is something that took place major recently. Do you know that the yuan, or the renminbi, which is the Chinese currency, has gained a foothold in global trade, and it has grown exponentially, while the dollar has fallen under 50% of global trade, which is unheard of. The dollar does not have over 50% of global trade anymore, and China is now working deals out again with Iran. That was a part of the $400 billion strategic deal. Russia just announced a few days ago, and I'm gonna pull it up, but I'm going to read the headline. I'm not going to read an article on it, but I want to read this headline. So bear with me. Let me pull it up while it's on my mind, to show you. This is about economics and geopolitics in America, seeing that she's losing her position. Here it is. The headline of the article, it says, Russia slashes dollar and euro from reserves in favor of gold and yuan. So that is another major economy that is shifting from the dollar and the euro and transitioning to the yuan. Russia and China has billions of dollars in trade. They have billions of dollars of gas deals and petrol deals and infrastructure deals. And now they say that they will be aligning their payment systems together, along with the Eurasian organization and the the Belt and Road Organization. This has great, well, I would say terrible ramifications for dollar hegemony and U.S. global supremacy. What would you say?
Well, no, that's definitely the trend that's accelerating. And one thing that needs to also be mentioned is the digital UN.
Yeah.
And that's going to allow China to conduct transactions without utilizing the American-controlled SWIFT organization, the SWIFT apparatus, I guess you could say, which clears foreign currency transactions between countries. So
stop right there. I need to add a caveat to that. I need to add a caveat. Keep that on your mind. That will do that because also the United States also is paid a portion of all transactions that goes through SWIFT. Also, this is how she continues to be able to influence. So go ahead.
Right. But the thing about SWIFT is because the U.S. controls it, it can basically apply secondary sanctions. So if we say, oh, you can't trade with Iran, well, that's a unilateral declaration on our part. It has no force of law in an international sense. It's absolutely illegal. It's extraterritoriality to the extreme. But if a country trades with Iran or embargoed company in China or whatnot, the U.S. can apply these secondary sanctions utilizing the SWIFT mechanism to penalize countries or companies that engage in what the U.S. Prescribes. Well, that's the whole basis of the sanctions regimes that we apply to our adversaries, designated adversaries. And the digital UN will allow China to circumvent, using SWIFT because it's not subject to any such apparatus. So that's a major threat to the supremacy of the dollar. And of course, a lot of trade now with Iran and other countries between China and these countries are done with currency exchange, one-on-one, bilateral currency transactions that totally bypass the dollar. So, yeah, what you're talking about is definitely something that the U.S. is extremely upset about because once the dollar loses its supremacy, that's one of the major underpinnings of our whole economy. And it will basically accelerate the decline of U.S. power. So let me get on to one other thing about the China threat. China does not want to impose itself on anybody. It's not coercive. If a country like Australia starts, to try to denigrate China, China is a very proud country, and they're going to say, "Look, if you're going to, talk shit about us, well, fuck it, we're not going to have anything to do with you," which is a perfectly legitimate response, right? Australia accuses China of genocide and of concocting COVID-19 and this and that and the other thing. And China says, look, we're your biggest trading partner. We import 50% of what you produce, and you import like 50% of what you import from us. Well, why should we deal with you if you're going to keep on trashing us? Have a little discretion, I mean, so China just says enough is enough. We're not going to deal with you any longer, and they're perfectly legitimate in doing that. They don't need Australia, but Australia damn well needs them. So let them, let them, uh, let them have what they desire.
Yeah.
So anyway, China's rise is basically an internal affair. They want to see their country prosper, and they're very modest in their aspirations. They want to create a moderately prosperous country by like 2035 or something like that, right? And a fully modernized socialist country by 2050. Well, what country in the world other than China talks about striving for moderate prosperity? You get the drift, it's like saying, well, we just want to grow and we want to fulfill the needs and wants and desires of our people, and we want to help other countries rise up as well. A shared destiny for humankind, as they put it. Why is that a threat? It's only a threat because if China succeeds in building its economy in all respects and in all around fashion, it will just on the face of it surpass the U.S. Not because it's out to gain hegemony, not as if it's out to rule the world. It's just a matter of the dynamics of the situation. China, as it develops, will become wealthier and more influential, and the role of the U.S. will be diminished as a result. But that's not because of any design on the part of China to try to compete with or dominate the U.S. It's just a matter of the natural result of one country rising, pulling itself up by its own bootstraps, and another country with a dysfunctional system of government and all sorts of internal contradictions falling behind. So whose fault is that? You can't blame China for trying to do the best for itself. And it's not China's fault that the U.S. Can't seem to get its own house in order. So this whole narrative about China as a threat and how we have to compete with China is just so much bullshit, to put it bluntly.
Well, another reason why America is so amped up and why she sees the end in sight and why she's so angry is because, like we talked about, the yuan is being traded and currency swaps. The yuan just got a bigger share of global exchanges. China set up her own independent gold exchange. China set up her own SWIFT system. China has set up her own international bank. She set up the BRICS Bank. She set up the R.I.P Bank, which funds all of these projects in Asia and Africa. So even if America tried to cut China off, China being in reality not what they're saying now, but China is actually the largest economy in the world. It would not work. She can't sanction China and break her like she would do someone else. Now, I want to pivot to something that you said when you talked about the digital yuan. Do you know that China is already getting ready to put ATMs for the Olympics where foreigners can use to get digital yuan wallets so that they can spend it in China, while America has not even come up with anything similar to that. And that has something to do with this, because I was looking at something on a report, and one of America's greatest fears, and when I say America, I'm talking about her elite greatest fears, is that China gets mad and then revalues her currency in gold and silver. Now, China says it only has like 1,500 tons of gold, and we all know that that's a lie, because it's between the first and the second largest miner of gold that goes between her and South Africa and her and Zimbabwe and her and Russia. It goes, it fluctuates like that as the main producers of it. But I want to play this clip here that talks about the relevance of the gold reserves that China has. And this is what has struck fear in the United States, because the West no longer has gold, and the West cannot manipulate the gold in the East anymore because of the Shanghai gold exchange. And this is what has got in America's crosshairs. So before I play that, I have to play the fair use video first. It's about 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So bear with me, then we'll come back and we'll play that. So just listen.
Gold is some useless, inert asset, right, whose heyday was in the 19th century, as irrelevant to modern finance as the horse is to transport. Maybe not. Today we return to a favourite theme of ours, and once I haven't looked at since probably 2019, and that is, how much gold does China have? And for those with short attention spans who don't want to watch to the end of this video, I'll cut straight to the chase. China has much more gold than it says it does. In fact, it has more gold than the US. Its enormous gold hoards are all part of its grand global reserve currency status designs. Right, now time to back up those assertions. Let's do an audit. Audits involve a lot of numbers, and too many numbers can get a little overwhelming, so I'm going to try and keep these numbers to a mentally digestible minimum. But let me start with perhaps the most important contextual figure and anchor that in your minds, and that is US gold holdings. Official records show that the United States owns some 8,133 tons, most of it in Fort Knox. Although I should say that gold in Fort Knox hasn't been audited for 50 years. The US is the world's largest gold owner, or so you would have thought, and gold comprises 77% of United States foreign exchange reserves. China's officially declared holdings are 1,948 tons, so about a bit less than a quarter of the US, and that makes up just 3% of its $3.2 trillion of foreign exchange holdings. The real number is, of course, much higher than that. China has been the world's largest gold producer since 2007. This past decade, it has produced about 15% of all the gold mined in the world. Last year, it produced 380 tons, which is about 20% more than the world's second largest producer, Australia. And since 2000, China has mined roughly 6,500 tons of gold, and more than half of Chinese gold production is state-owned. China National Gold Corporation alone accounts for 20%. So already, just on Chinese gold production alone, that official 1,948 ton figure looks doubtful. Crucially, China keeps all of the gold it mines. Exporting domestic gold production is not allowed. And with reserves in decline at home, Chinese mining companies have also been buying assets abroad, across Africa, South America and Asia. And international production exceeded domestic production by about 15 tons last year. But as well as being the world's biggest producer, China is also the world's biggest importer of gold. It's hard to get precise import figures, but we do know that, for example, via Hong Kong alone, over 6,000 tons has entered the country since 2000. So if you add that to cumulative gold production since 2000, you get a figure of 13,200 tons. Whether imported, mined or recycled, most of the gold that enters China goes through the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the SGE, including the gold imported from Hong Kong. So SGE withdrawals, for which we do have numbers, can act as something of an approximation for demand. And it is possible to get numbers for SGE withdrawals. Since 2008, roughly 20,000 tons have been withdrawn from the SGE. Then we have to add in all the gold held in China, whether as bullion or jewellery, prior to 2,000. And the World Gold Council estimates a figure of 2,500 tons in privately held jewellery. If you add domestic mining and official reserves, you arrive at a figure of about 4,000 tons. Now, Nick Laird of Gold Charts R Us, one of the world's leading gold data experts, has cobbled it all together to produce this chart, which shows cumulative gold held in China to be around 28,911 tons. I've spoken to numerous analysts, Ross Norman, Bron Suchetsky, formerly of the Perth Mint, Koos Janssen, and they all arrive at similar estimates. In addition, there is gold entering China that is not accounted for by SGE withdrawals. Ross Norman points out that the People's Bank of China, the PBOC, likes to buy 12.5 kilo gold bars. They don't trade on the SGE. Also, the PBOC often uses dollars on exchanges in London, Dubai and Switzerland, while the SGE sells its gold in yuan. The army too owns gold and doesn't have to declare its purchases. Remember, there are many state agencies on top of the army and the central bank which buy gold. There's the State Administration of Foreign Exchange and China Investment Corporation, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, to give you two examples. So how much of all that huge hoard is state-owned? 40%? 50%? 60%? But at 50%, the implication is that China owns roughly 14,500 tons. That is 1.8 times more than the US. Now, it may be that only 20 or 30% of that gold is state-owned. I find that unlikely. But even if that's the case, it still owns more than the US. And China has been famously encouraging its citizens to buy gold since 2008. And the SGE has actually stated that only consumers buy gold over exchange. But it almost doesn't matter. This encouragement to buy gold, as one of my readers resident in China reported to me, kicked off a frenzy of laundry as China's citizens rushed to exchange the hordes of hooky cash they'd built up. In his local bank in Shanghai, he said, in 2009, he was standing behind a Chinese bloke who was unlocking bundles of euros, US dollars, Singapore dollars, Swiss francs in exchange for 5 kilo gold bars across the counter. Gold ownership in China is registered, so the government knows how much its citizens have. But it's commonly thought that should Beijing invite private holders of gold to support a major government currency initiative by pledging their gold as a kind of war bond, then there would be a 99% pickup. The vast majority of Chinese trust their government, especially when it comes to returning China to the top of the world. And that means a considerable amount of extra gold can very quickly be mobilized to participate in whatever Beijing is planning. Chinese gold holders don't have the same mistrust of government held by Western gold bugs. The party's seen as a good housewife to the nation. But the disruption it would cause means there's no way China can declare such large official holdings, not yet anyway. There'd be an unwanted surge in both the yuan and the gold price. The government's $3.2 trillion of US dollar foreign exchange reserves would be devalued. And to declare that much gold would be a direct challenge to American supremacy, which China is, I don't think, yet ready for. Parity first, then supremacy. So for now, they follow Deng Xiaoping's doctrine of we must not shine too brightly until everything is ready. President Trump wrong-footed the Chinese, and that and COVID, the great accelerator, may have brought schedules forward. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is known as a man of destiny, and he may want the great ascension to happen on his watch. But backing its money, if only in part with gold, as empires on the rise are wont to do, would give China great credibility in a world awash with money printing.
So, with that said, I was told a few years ago, I won't say it because it was told in confidentiality, and it was by a real respected scholar. As a matter of fact, one person that you may know who coined the term full spectrum dominance, that China was building up her gold reserves for this fact, just in case the dollar declined or America tried to use China's dollar holdings against her and try to devalue it, it would have something to keep its value and also to place it not on par but above America if the dollar declines or if economic warfare breaks out. What do you say about this?
Excuse me. Well, I'm not all that conversant in this particular issue. What you just showed sounds very credible to me, and I really have no doubt as to its veracity. So yeah, it does seem to ring true. Of course, China is keeping things close to the vest, and it doesn't want to reveal its hand prematurely. But like any good poker player, she knows what the bottom line is, and when the time's ripe, it will implement the plans that it has definitely already decided upon. One thing, however, of course, that must be taken into account is the unbelievable amount of fiat money that the U.S. is printing.
Yes.
To the tune of trillions and trillions of dollars. Not only for COVID-19 relief and for building back America, as Biden is wont to say, but also to finance the MIC, the military industrial complex. $1 trillion bucks a year over a 10-year period. That's $10 trillion down the drain because all of that production has absolutely no utility. It enriches Raytheon and other corporations. Obviously, the employees of those corporations get paid, but untold billions, trillions of dollars are fed into the coffers of these military industrial corporations. So that's, and then of course, all of this infrastructure, that money is, most of it will not circulate in the economy, but it will be siphoned off by the construction companies and other corporate entities of one sort or another. So all of this money is a will o' the wisp. I mean, there's no backing to it. It's just based on the good credit worthiness of the U.S. government. But there's no, I mean, that credibility of the government and its ability to manage its own affairs is diminishing by the day. And now, if you read the most recent reports, inflation is beginning to rear its ugly head. I just read a report online today from one of the standard mass media outfits that expect within the next year or two a real spike in inflation for all sorts of commodities at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and elsewhere, which is obviously what happens when you print money without stop. And as in the 1970s, I don't know, you're a young man, so you probably don't recall, but inflation was up around 18%. When my mother was a school teacher back in the 1960s, she made $4,000 a year, right? Which was considered, well, now it's $40,000 a year. But the major jump in the wage price spiral, as it was called, was in the late 70s, where incomes multiplied by a factor of 3. So from 4,000 to 12,000 became the average annual income for a middle class worker. That's what I was earning as a machinist back in the late 70s, early 80s. 10 years before that, it would have been $4,000. But by after this wage price spiral, it was up around 12,000. Now, of course, that's continued apace. But generally speaking, I don't see the wages increasing since there's been this wage stagnation. As prices go up, I don't see a commensurate increase in wages under our current circumstance. So this is going to continue to impoverish the American worker, while the corporate elite are going to be rolling in dough as these stimulus packages get implemented. If they do, of course, the likelihood is that they won't. But the money is still already, it's to the tune of $6 trillion. So our deficit and is skyrocketing. It's going to continue on for years on end. Our debt, our national debt, is up above 100% of GDP. China, it's only 40%. That's the national debt. I think our national debt now is up around 120, 130% of GDP, which is in a danger zone. China has a lot of internal debt, but that can be easily handled because if you print your own currency, you can always leverage internal debt. But the U.S. debt, a lot of it is held overseas, and it's going to come back to bite them sooner than later. So, of course, when that all happens, that's when China is going to be in a better position to begin maybe implementing whatever plans it has in regards to its gold reserves, and just having that backing, that tangible backing for the UN that the U.S. dollar will lack. And particularly as we go to a, quote, green economy, as we move away from fossil fuels, well, what about the euro dollar? That's going to basically evaporate. Of course, what they say now is that silicon chips are the modern day equivalent of fossil fuels. So, and we still have some monopoly on chip manufacture, but China and the stupidity of it is by restricting the sale of chips to China, which is a major market. They were importing $360 billion of U.S. chips. Now, if we constrain that, it's only going to hurt our chip manufacturers and incentivize China to develop its own industry, which is what
they're already doing it. They're already doing it.
And it might take a couple of years, but China, functions on the long term. So within 5 years, you're going to see the Chinese chip sector is going to be on a par with the major powers in Taiwan, South Korea, and the U.S., the major chip producing corporations. It's only a matter of time. And we're accelerating that by putting all these sanctions and embargoes on China's ability to purchase chips from any manufacturer that uses U.S. technology to whatever degree. So it's a self-defeating policy that is only going to result in China getting into a position of dominance in that field as well.
That's right. That's right. And back to on this dollar thing, I want to point out something also. This was from Sputnik News, and this is what they had to say because they were following China's lead. Remember, earlier in the show, I read to you something from RT when they were talking about how Russia has now started selling off its dollar and its euro holdings in favor of more gold and more yuans in their baskets of currency in their reserves or whatever. So this also comes from Sputnik News, and this is the headline. Dollar's share in global trade will drop once people begin to doubt its stability, the Kremlin says. Now, the Kremlin, for those of you who don't know, the Kremlin is equivalent to the White House. That's Russia's White House. And they're telling you that with all of these sanctions that are coming on the people by the U.S. trying to maintain its hegemony, she's slicing off her nose in spite of her face. And this is where that gold and all the silver reserves that China has would come into play. But let me read the first paragraph, the first two paragraphs, and then I'm going to come back and then I'm going to play a short clip. And after that, me and Professor Etler will talk about it before we close the show. So remember, the headline is this: Dollar's share in global trade will drop once people begin to doubt its stability, the Kremlin says. In the face of sweeping new sanctions targeting its sovereign debt and threats of being cut off from SWIFT, Visa, and other financial instruments, Moscow has recently gone on the diplomatic offensive, encouraging trade partners to continue to move away from the use of the dollar in trade and to create alternative payment systems. The share of the dollar in Russia's foreign trade operations has been declining from year to year. And the same thing will happen in countries the world over once people begin to doubt the U.S. currency stability, presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said. Now, with that said, they were following in the line of China and how China is building up its reserve and doing currency swaps and bilateral trade agreements to lessen the sanction effect and to lessen dollar hegemony, because a lot of people don't know that with this SWIFT system and with the dollar being the world reserve currency, America has been able to export inflation for decades to other countries. So, but I want you brought up something about 5 to 10 minutes ago, Professor Etler, you brought up something about the system and the instability of it and the debt. I'm going to play a clip here. This was today by a recurring guest on this show also. His name is Gregory Manarino. He's an investment guru, and he often talks about this stuff. He's been on my show multiple times, and I'm going to play a clip for him. I'm going to use the fair use thing again because I don't want any problems with YouTube because they banned my channel. They gave me strikes. They censored me. They did everything. So I'm going to use this before I play this clip. Now, I want you all to listen to Gregory Manarino, and something major took place in the markets today. Something catastrophic took place that most of you have not seen. And this goes back to the instability of the dollar and the instability of the system that Professor Etler was talking about. I want you to listen to this. This is a short, I think it's about 3 or 4 minute clip. Here we go.
Okay, everybody, it's me, Gregory Manarino. It is Friday, May 7th, 2021. And how about we start off with this? History has just been made, and the market didn't even open yet. What am I talking about? We just got a piece of economic news that could not possibly be worse. Okay. Economists polled expected this private payrolls jobs number to be 1 million. It came in at 266,000. For your information, this is the biggest miss in history. The biggest miss in history. Now, maybe one of you can explain this to me, because it's always the same story. How is it that these economists that are polled are consistently and always wrong? They're never right. Look, I understand. Look, I'm not right all the time either, but at least I get it right most of the time. These people are never right ever. It's shocking to me. What are they doing? Are they drinking the Kool-Aid? Are they buying? We are not in an economic recovery whatsoever. Zero. Where's the proof? Okay, yesterday, you remember I showed you that nice chart of the money velocity? The money velocity being at a historic low, or very close to a historic low. You cannot have a booming economy or even an improving economy without money velocity moving higher. Can't happen. Okay, but they can't tell you that. Look, it's an incredible thing here. So the biggest jobs miss in history. Congratulations. All right, let's talk about this too. And I had to write this down. This was yesterday. My little notepad. I love this notepad. I'm almost out of paper. The Federal Reserve, okay, is warning of significant losses in the market because valuations in the stock market have gotten way out of control.
Now, with that said, I'm going to read an article, not the article, but the headline to this latest article that goes in with that. It says, U.S. trade deficit surges to record high. Shortfall with China keeps rising. Now, I want to ask you, Mr. Etler, your opinion on this, but also I want to pose a question to you, and you just give me your honest assessment or your honest answer. How can you successfully wage war with your financier, your creditor, your manufacturer, and your largest trade partner?
You can't. So, but getting back to what was just said, and he didn't mention the projections regarding inflation, which feeds into what he was discussing as well. Of course, the job numbers, those are a total fiction, no matter how you cut it, in terms of the number of people in the job market, which has declined by 8 million over the last period with the recession and all. So there are millions of people who are not even counted as being unemployed. So they talk about, oh, the unemployment rate is down now to around 6.5%. Oh, that's absurd. That's not taking into account the 8 million people who are no longer looking for work. And then, of course, this stimulus, these stimulus payments, and the extended unemployment, that has a decisive impact, because that can't go on forever. And within another few months, after the pandemic begins to recede, there's no way that those payments will continue. The courts just revoked the moratorium on evictions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Combine all of that with what we discussed previously, and you can see that the American economy is at a precipice. And also the overvaluation of the stock market. That's a typical bubble, which is going to burst when all the shit hits the fan. So we're at the precipice. and we're about to fall off it. That's why Biden is so keen on pushing his $1 trillion bill
Infrastructure.
in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, with an absolute tie, there's no majority in Congress. There's no prospect of what he has proposed being passed and implemented. Now he's talking about compromise, whatever that means. Given the track record of what occurred under Obama and the intransigence of the Republicans, they're not going to give an inch. They have no incentive to do so. So we're just going to keep on keeping on in the same on the same track that's inevitably leading to disaster. There's no two ways about it. I don't see how you can come to any other conclusion. So all of this talk about China, it's a smokescreen. What they're trying to do is deflect away from our internal problems by putting up an external threat. I mean, we've done this forever. Standard operating procedure. Focus on China. This and that and the other thing have absolutely no relevance to our situation. No matter what's going on in Xinjiang, what relevance does that have to the U.S., to our domestic agenda? What the fuck does Hong Kong have to do with anything? Who gives a flying fuck about Taiwan, for God's sake? Well, there's one thing about Taiwan. Since Taiwan is the major manufacturer of advanced chipsets, right? If China and Taiwan come together by hook or by crook, however, if you get a greater China, that's curtains.
Mm-hmm.
Combine Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and the mainland into one unit, right? And that's curtains. That's the end of it for the U.S. dominance in East Asia and the rest of the world, for that matter. The dominoes will begin falling immediately once Taiwan is reintegrated into China. I would call it Greater China. They can keep their institutions and whatnot, but as long as they basically become integrated economically and otherwise with the rest of China, that's something that the U.S. can't countenance. That's the only reason why you think the U.S. gives a damn about democracy or the status of the Chinese people in Taiwan? We could care less. It's all pure geopolitics and economics in the driver's seat. It has nothing to do with freedom, democracy, values, or whatnot. That's all a smokescreen. And it's a convenient, like I say, bludgeon to beat China with. But it has no relevance to the real world, to what's happening within our own borders and in the rest of the world. It's really, as the Chinese say, it's their own damn business. Why don't people condemn American racism and mass incarceration and this and that? I mean, the litany of abuses that the U.S. engages in is a mile long, but nobody seems to hold the U.S. accountable for anything it ever does. But China engages in the slightest infraction, most of which are totally concocted, and you'll never hear the end of it. Yeah, it's all playing out. China really just wants to go about looking after its own, developing its own resources, and it has its own goals that it's set. It knows how to reach them. It's going about doing so. There's nothing the U.S. can do to stop China from continuing on its path of national rejuvenation. You've seen China's just rolled over every roadblock that the U.S. has put in its way, from the pandemic to the trade war. They're going to roll over the tech war, and they just keep on going because they have the people behind them. They have a unified country. They have the legacy of 6,000 years of civilization. They have the infrastructure. They have the human capital. They have so much going their way that there's no stopping it. And then compare it to what's going on in the U.S. When in terms of our healthcare system, our educational system, our social welfare system, our infrastructure. Why is Biden so keen on trying to talk all that up? Because he realizes that if things don't change, it's curtains for the U.S. So it's a last gasp on his part, and of course he's a figurehead, but the forces behind him, they see this as a last gasp for the U.S. to try to retain its position of global dominance, and they really see they're really scared shitless. That's why they're proposing all of this stuff. But the prospect of any of it being implemented, and even if it is, even if these grandiose plans are passed, the implementation is something else again. China's been building on its successes and developing its plans through collaboration and consultation. They spend an immense amount of energy, trial and error, trying this, trying that, implementing those programs that succeed. We don't do anything like that. In China, it's much more from the bottom up. Even though we say it's from the top down, it's from the top down here. There's no bottom up here. What sort of bottom up? What sort of input does the average citizen have on the direction of U.S. Foreign or domestic policy? It's all basically concocted in these backroom deals behind closed doors, and then wrapped in a pretty package and presented to the country as this is the silver bullet, the magic potion that will solve all our problems. And we see year after year the promise is not fulfilled, and we just stumble on from one false start to the next. I don't see where that's going to change anything. There's no reason to believe that it will.
So I'll let you have the last word there. Unless you wanted to add anything else to what you were saying about America's tenuous position here as China's rise, because we see a lot of stuff going on, and you may wanted to say a few more things about the one rising and one is in decline for the people.
We covered a lot of bases. I just think people should be extremely skeptical about anything they hear about China in the mass media. And that covers the standard media outlets, the networks and the corporate news media, as well as the alt media. Because the alt media is a cover I mean, they're owned by the corporations. I mean, it's not as if they are independent sources of news. So you got to be really, really skeptical about anything you hear about China, because the whole objective is to try to portray China in as negative a light as possible, not to acknowledge anything positive. You hear all these horror stories, unsubstantiated horror stories, but how many articles or how many reports do you hear about all the bridges built in China, about the high-speed rail network, about their superhighway system, which rivals that of the U.S.? What reports do you hear, except occasionally, about the poverty alleviation program, about their drive for an ecological civilization, about the fact that these wetlands now are seeing the return of all these migratory birds, and on and on and on. The fact that fishing was banned in the Yangtze River, the Changjiang, China's major river, southern China's major river, we all know. They banned fishing along the entire length of the Yangtze River, and it's recuperating. The environmental degradation that occurred during the industrialization of China in the 80s and 90s and into the aughts, is being reversed because of making a concerted effort for environmental restoration. And now they're going into a rural revitalization. So based on the poverty alleviation program, they're going in and they're creating ecotourism and all sorts of other ways to basically rejuvenate the countryside. Not as in this country where we let the rural areas decay and become impoverished. So they're building clinics in the rural villages while we close hospitals in our rural towns. I mean, it's like the total reverse of what we're doing. They're expanding all of their basic social programs, health care, education, retirement benefits, subsidies of one sort or another. It's all being expanded in China where it's being reduced here. So it's the exact opposite of what we're told. And I think viewers must realize that and seek out real information about China from people who have been there, are still there, have a knowledge of what the real situation is. I might mention the gray zone. Are you familiar with the gray zone?
Yes.
Max Blumenthal and his crew. And they've debunked all of this, China bashing business. So check out them. And there's a lot of good information out there, but you got to look for it and follow the leads and educate oneself about what the true situation is, and not swallow the poison pill of U.S. propaganda.
Right. Well, on that note, we'll leave it there. They've just heard about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I'd like to thank our reoccurring guest, Professor Dennis Etler. Thank you so much. We'll have you back, and you and I will talk later. You be blessed. Have a blessed day. And as we close the show, as I always say, I love you, but God will always love you best. Hey, Mom, I love you.
Okay, you take care now, and the best.